There has never been a more important time to move in a vegan direction. Whether you're ready to start, restart, or re-energize your vegan or plant-based practice, this podcast is for you. I'm Michelle Olander, life coach, vegan, ADHD matriarch, travel lover, and smoothie loather. And I know that it's the details that get in the way of your vegan journey. But I like to believe that the obstacle is always the way. So every week we meet here where I translate the tools of life coaching and Stoic philosophy. I bring you actionable tips, some laughs, interesting guests, and vegan ideas for everyone at any age. All to help you veg your best. Episode 301. Must be nice. Welcome back, my Veg Your Bestie, episode 301. And I wanted to start today with a solo episode. And we're going to talk about something, well, I was aiming at something else today, but something that seems to happen to me pretty regularly. And I have a feeling it might also happen to you. You know, sometimes this podcast is a pretty big part of my life, and I'll mention to someone in my world, in my real life, a topic or someone I'm thinking of interviewing. Maybe it's a plant-based doctor or a chef or an athlete or someone doing really interesting work in the plant-based or vegan space. And this friend or family member will hear the names, will hear what the topic and say something like, "Oh my gosh, must be nice. I hope they're not those smug people who think they've got it figured out already." Or, "Michelle, I just can't stand people in the self-development world." And, you know, I have learned that this is the response from certain people. So I don't usually bring up these topics, but sometimes I'm answering a question of what I'm up to. Anyway, and I want to be honest with you. My first reaction in those situations tends to be a little bit like, what's going on here? Why does somebody else's job or advocacy feel like a problem to you? Why does this feel like some sort of accusation to you? So I've been sitting with, I've been doing this podcast a little over 5 years. This has come up more than a few times, and I've been sitting on this topic for a while now, and I think I'm understanding it a little bit better, and I don't think I'm the only one out there in this podcast listener group who runs into this. There are people who feel offended by your growth or your change or you thinking about it. Must be nice, they think. And I say every week, this podcast is for people who want to start, restart, or re-energize their plant-based and vegan practice. And most of you listening right now are what I think of as a little bit more like me. My Veg Your Besties, you're curious, you're open, you're actually, you actually find something energizing about learning new things or how people make change or getting a little better at something or making a distinction in the way you approach something that makes makes things more effective for you or more fun. But I know many of us, you also love people who are, not like that. People who, when the topic of changing things or learning things, whether it's food or finances or habits or health or fitness, they seem to feel not curious at all. They seem to be offended, like the whole conversation is some sort of attack or critique of them. And, I found it over the years, I've gotten a little more used to it. I'm a little more, blasé about it. But I found it a little confusing. I found it even a little bit hurtful. This must be nice. You want to share something you care about, and that door, you see the lights in the eyes just go off and closed, and a little bit of pushback. So I wanted to talk about this reaction today. A lot of us, when we move in a vegan or plant-based direction, will run into it. And it's not to fix or change those people. That's not our work. That's never our work. We work on ourselves. But I think understanding it a little bit better changes how you feel about it and yourself. So if there's a person who hears from me in my life, if I'm saying I'm having a plant-based chef on the podcast this week, and that person thinks, oh my God, I hope they're not those smug people who think they've got it all figured out. They've heard something that you didn't actually say. They're not reacting to what you said. They're not reacting to what I said. They're reacting to what they heard underneath. And that gap between what was said by me or you and what they heard, well, that tells you everything. The psychologist Carol Dweck, who we've talked about many times on this podcast, she spent decades researching what she calls fixed versus growth mindset. And one of her most important findings was that for people with a fixed mindset, a suggestion of change can feel a lot less like a statement or information, and it feels like judgment. They don't hear, oh, well, here's something I did, or here's something you could explore if you're interested. They hear, you're kind of inadequate the way you are. The very idea of growth implies to certain people that where they are currently isn't enough. And that is genuinely painful if you've spent years believing that your worth is tied to who you already are rather than what you're interested in becoming. And Brene Brown, who's done so much research on shame and is such a great communicator, she talks about that deep level of shame, not embarrassment, real shame. It's when a person feels fundamentally not enough. And when shame is running the show, the instinct we have is to protect, deflect, and dismiss. Protect, deflect, and dismiss. And I think that can be summed up when you hear somebody go, oh, must be nice. Must be nice. And this became very helpful to me because I couldn't quite figure out what was going on. I would talk about something I'm doing. I would be answering usually a question because, in my line of work, unless somebody's interested and asks me about it, I tend to try to keep it, between me and the people who do care about it. Typically, if I talk about something I'm doing or working on or learning about, most people, whether they care or not, will say things like, oh, cool. Or what made you think of that? Or how long have you been doing this? Even if they have no interest in the topic. Or how did you get that idea? Or how did you go about developing that? Or how did you start that? But a certain number of people in my life typically react kind of negatively. They get kind of prickly and a little bit dismissive. And I don't think it's because they're unkind people. In fact, I know it's not. I know it's not because they're unkind people. And I know it's not because they're unhappy about what I do or what we've built here at Veg Your Best. But I think that they are people who have felt hurt, probably more than once, and possibly by this very world of wellness and self-development that many of us are interested in. And for sure, many of you will be able to relate to sharing something you've learned or accomplished along your vegan journey, and where most people might just say, oh, wow, good for you. Or, gosh, you've been doing that quite a while. You've learned a lot. You may run into people in your life who say, must be nice. Must be nice to have the time. Must be nice to have the financial ability or the family or the support or the job or live in the right town or have the cultural background or whatever it is to make that possible. And that must be nice thing, well, it never sounds nice, does it? It sounds really pretty judgy and dismissive. And, my clients bring this up all the time. So when someone you love says, I hate these people with their self-development, they might actually be telling you something really important about what that space has cost them. And there's another layer to this. Sometimes people resist the idea of change not because they're afraid of failing again, not just because of that, or not just because they're worried about having new evidence that they can't do something, that they're not disciplined enough or smart enough or capable or / successful or lucky, etc. They're afraid of something that could sometimes feel even more uncomfortable. They're afraid of realizing that maybe they could have been doing this all along, or at least a lot longer. You know, Glenda the Good Witch telling Dorothy at the end of The Wizard of Oz that she had the power to go home the whole time with those ruby slippers of hers. And Dorothy's response isn't like, oh, that's fabulous. It's almost like, why didn't you tell me? But Glenda says you wouldn't have believed me. You had to learn yourself. That's what makes accomplishments so amazing, don't you think? Because we do have to learn these things for ourselves in the time that we have, at the time that it works. There are people in your life, maybe it's you sometimes, it's certainly me sometimes, we're one small decision away from recognizing that we've got actually more agency than I've been, or you've been allowing yourselves to believe. And that's not always comfortable, right? Because if you have the power now, you have to sit with the fact that you've probably had that power for a while. And maybe your excuses for why you couldn't weren't entirely accurate. That's not a reason to stay stuck, but it is a real thing to feel. And it's okay to feel it, and it deserves compassion rather than impatience or judgment when we see it, whether it's in ourselves or in our friends and family. The person who shuts down when ideas of change or growth, the person who shuts down when those ideas come up, you might be that person sometimes. Maybe not in the vegan area, maybe not in the plant-based area, but maybe in some other area of life. And that's something that Carol Dweck's research is super clear about. Mindset, it's not global. You can have a growth mindset about maybe food or health and a fixed mindset about relationships or career. You can be wide open to plant-based exploration and completely closed off about maybe your finances or your creativity or your body image or learning math or Spanish or getting strong in any of a million old ideas about what you're capable of personally, professionally. It's not everything or nothing. It's not everywhere or nowhere. None of us is purely one way in every aspect of our lives. So when you feel frustrated by someone else who won't engage, who says, must be nice, who dismisses or deflects or gets quietly offended, it might be worth asking ourselves, where is that? Where is that me? Where in my own life do I hear a suggestion or an idea and dismiss it out of hand, or actually judge the kinds of people who have those ideas? Where do I protect myself from the possibility of failure by deciding something's impossible before I even try? And that question isn't meant for you to feel bad. It's meant for you to feel, maybe more connected to other human beings. Because the moment we find our own version of fixed mindset in our lives, we stop worrying about the resistant person who says must be nice. They're just human. They're just like you. When I was a young mom, I remember not in a good mood hearing the advice from my dad that I needed to put some things on the calendar just for me. I think he thought I was getting a little He didn't really recognize me because I was just going from pillar to post as a mom and a wife and working, and something he wanted just for me. And I remember really just dismissing that, you know? I was like, what are you talking about? Make a plan, put it on the calendar, and watch 13,000 things come up that make that plan not work. And I remember saying that, and my dad was looking at me. My dad, who was a physician and a full-time professor at the University of Connecticut Medical School, and he was for sure sympathetic. But he said, you know, if there isn't an emergency, in those occasions, you'll know just what to do or where to go or what you wanted. And even if it's preempted 90% of the time, 10% of the time, you'll be doing more of what you want, Michelle. I remember like, holy cow, what is this? Okay, easy for him to say. He's a physician with a full-time job and on call, and yeah, he's got medical students and he's got residents to train and write papers for and attract to the program and meet with and papers to write and publish and a house and a car and a family. Okay, all right. Okay, because that's all of us, isn't it? We are all busy. We are all fully committed. We are all overstretched and subject to injuries and viruses and friends who need help and family emergencies. And we can make that mean that people who are doing something that we aren't, well, we can decide that it's because they don't have the same issues or problems or situation that we have. Must be nice. And no, they probably don't have all the same ones. But they also probably did not start at the level that we're seeing them at now. So many of the people who listen here every week, they're not starting brand new with the idea of a plant-based or vegan journey, but a lot of them are restarting. They're coming back. And maybe you're one of those people who was doing really well, and then, you know, life, holidays happened, you traveled, or work was around the clock, or life got heavy, or there was an emergency, and, you know, whatever, fill in the blank. And now there's this gap, this distance between who you were being and what you'd like. And that gap has started to feel like evidence of some sort, evidence that you can't really do this, evidence that all that initial excitement you had was naive or you're not capable, evidence that maybe the resistant people in your life are right to be skeptical of you. And I want to tell you something. Yes, that gap might be evidence of some things, but it's not a verdict. It's not judgment. It might be evidence that certain strategies didn't work, certain tactics didn't work. It might be evidence that you didn't have all your focus and all your skills in the right way, in the right place. It might be evidence that you needed help and that you didn't get the help that you needed. Maybe you asked for it and it was rebuffed. Maybe you didn't even ask for it. It might be evidence, but it's not a judgment or a verdict unless you decide to make it one. I'm the same. I would love to have a clean, unbroken chain of accomplishments, of doing things every day perfectly. I would love the perfect record, the before and after with nothing messy in between. I'd like that too. But think about it. Every meaningful accomplishment in your life, every relationship, every skill, every diploma or license or job, every version of yourself, everything you're genuinely proud of, how many of them were built on an unbroken chain of success? Most of us who have relationships of any lasting duration, we've survived rupture and repair. Our careers have included some failures and detours and scary restarts in our daily commute. Even our daily commute It's not always the perfect, most direct journey, right? Our greatest accomplishments come from the moments we get it wrong. Our wisdom, our experience of what goes wrong are what makes so many of us valuable. And if an unbroken chain of success is the only way to build anything real, most of us would have almost nothing to point to. You know, I talk about vegan life, plant-based life as a practice, like meditation, like yoga. And there's a beautiful concept in meditation that when your mind wanders and you notice it and you gently bring it back, understanding that that is normal, that's that moment of noticing and returning back. That is the meditation. It's not a failure of practice. The practice is coming back. And your vegan practice is the same. And everything important is the same, right? It's coming back. Getting aware, not judging yourself, being compassionate with yourself. And that self-compassion has been researched by Kristen Neff, and she calls that common humanity, right? That recognition that struggle and imperfection and falling short, these are not signs of inadequacy. These make up the universal texture of being a human. That gap between what we're aiming for and where we are right now, it's not a waste. That gap is part of the practice. And that coming back, however many times, from however far, it's not starting over. It's the practice. And a lot of our friends and family who kind of push back or dismiss and go, oh, must be nice. I think that's a distinction that they're not seeing yet. So let's just ourselves keep that in mind, right? So if you're one of my Veg Your Besties and you've got someone kind of resistant, kind of prickly in your life, someone who goes, I don't know, who kind of sulks or gets sharp with you when the idea of change or growth or development comes up, I hope today gave you a little more space to hold them in. You know, you don't have to fix them. You don't have to convince them. You don't have to wait for them to come around. Just understand, most of us are like that in some aspect of our lives, and they're protecting something. Most of them hear about your change. Most of the people react that way. Must be nice. They're protecting something in their lives, and that's not your work to do for them. And if you're one of my Veg Your Besties who's also a restarter, if you're listening to this from the other side of a gap, of a fail, of a drop the ball period of time, welcome back. Genuinely. You know, the door's never locked. There's no penalty for coming back to any important issue in your life. You're not behind. Like Glenda says, you've had the power all along to veg your best.
Veg Your Best podcast production, music, and editing by Charlie Weinshank. Thanks, Charlie. Before you go, it would mean so much to me and the Veg Your Best team if you would hit subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, or share with someone you think might be interested. Something about algorithms, it helps bump us up a little in the rankings, and that's the best way to help others find the podcast and for us to find our audience. So, until next week, make it easy and veg your best.